Hey there, I am back with another video. It is 12:41 p.m. I think it's May 13th. Let me just double check here. Yeah, it's May 13th and it's Tuesday afternoon, so I'm just kind of sitting here on my bed. I did some dictation, and so this wraps up one section of my presentation. And what I had mentioned splitting some of this and modifying what I've already created. So yeah, I'm doing some backtracking, but I realized that, even if I had like a team helping me with this project, I realized that, there's always review, there's always revisions, there's always editing. And I put a very high expectation on myself. And sometimes I think, Maria, you're just a little too hard on yourself. You just really are. I am a one woman show, okay? Meaning I write the content, and I narrate the content. I will say narrate very poorly. I'm not a good narrator. I have entirely too many things that go through my mind as I'm trying to repeat what I'm reading. And as I'm reading, something else is coming to my mind and I end up fumbling the words. It takes me forever to narrate, okay? But you know what? I do the best I can, okay? Also, when it comes to pictures, adding visuals to my presentations, I feel as though I could improve on that. And I'm honest about it. I've never said that I was a professional, but the thing is that when people have challenges, like if I feel like I'm challenging myself, I do the best I can to make those sort of improvements. So yeah, I'm excited about this particular presentation, and I really want it to have a decent impact, meaning that I want people to understand it in a very basic way, and so that it's relatable and it's easy for them to implement in their lives as they go along. Okay, being aware of things that go on, of violations that happen to them, and also being careful about the kind of behavior that they exhibit so that they don't get themselves in this sort of trouble. And like I said, if people choose not to just not ignore it or whatever, people are going to start looking at their behavior as it's rude. You know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to say, is that how we behave really does make a difference. Also, it has a lot to do with our understanding of being able to be empathetic. Some people are completely lacking in empathy, which I think this particular situation, my targeting, does highlight this. I mean, it shows so many and proves so many interesting points. It proves there's flaws in the education system. It proves that there's a lot of people who have titles that don't deserve it. It proves that a lot of people do not understand the history of the religion, the doctrine of the religion. It proves the issue of mind control. It proves the issue of racism. It proves the issue of sexism. I mean, all the way down the line. If this situation is not published in a textbook by now, I am surprised. It really should be. This is very eye-opening because it is a major issue. And I do get the intuitive message that a lot of people are very grateful that people are talking about mental illness, because a lot of people were affected by this whole thing, okay? A lot of people who were affected by losing their jobs because of the carelessness of the employment sectors that were hiring and firing people just willy-nilly, just because it was a game. It became a little covert war that was enacted on people. People started recognizing and realizing and waking up that they were indeed targeted individuals, victims of human trafficking, as well as for the people who were not victims. They had to watch the people sit here and have to deal with this sort of trauma and keep quiet. That alone right there could be some sort of trauma that people are dealing with. So it is a nightmare, okay? What happened was a nightmare. And it all started off with, of course, the experiment, but it became explosive where? In the workplace. In the workplace, okay? This is what I'm talking about. And I'm sad to say, okay, I told you so. I'm not happy to say I told you so, but the only thing I could be grateful about in this situation is that I believe that now people are waking up and they're going to actually take active measures to make sure that this never happens again. I am very, very, very sorry that this happened. But as I create and work on my project, I'm talking about laying the foundation, which is featuring and talking about the moral reset. Okay. as I work through it, I keep wanting to add this here too. And I keep thinking that it's important to also mention this. I sometimes mention, definitions and stuff like that because I am starting to understand that not everybody, realizes this sort of stuff. And even though some of these people may have gone to law school, even though some of these people may be psychologists or whatever, and I'm trying to keep it as basic as I possibly can, but I want to make it relatable. Okay, it's like for people who may have been educated at one time and maybe forgot the knowledge or whatever, this is a challenge to be re-educated and redirected, okay? And for people who've never heard of this sort of stuff before, now they could look at this as a form of education. And I do encourage other people to take a deeper interest in these sort of things relating to human behavior, relating to the implications of human behavior, which would be the law, okay? But I'm giving you snippets, and I think it's enough to understand. You know what I mean? In these segments that I'm talking about, and in ways that it's easy to communicate these things. For example, I'm going into I haven't actually narrated this part yet, but I'm talking about the responsibility of parents, right? And talking about how parents can have a better interaction with their kids, because a lot of times people say, well, I don't really know what to talk about with my kid. There's always something to talk about with your kid. When you get into the car, you can talk about putting their seatbelt on. You could ask them, hey, do you know why you put your seatbelt on? And the kid's going to say, I don't know because you tell me to, but tell them why. It's a law. There's always something to teach your kid. I mean, even things relating to their playtime, that you can teach them life skills when you're playing, and it can be very enjoyable for you as well as the child. And you can show them, things that relate to customer service. Those little restaurant type, those little restaurant type toys where like the kids have like this little outfit and then like a little menu and they have like cooking utensils and stuff like that. You can teach them how would they like it if they went into a restaurant, and you can make up scenarios that are actually pretty funny. I saw somebody on YouTube doing this with their kid. I can't remember the name of the channel, but he was just doing and having a fun time, right? But in some ways, it is kind of establishing a standard for the newer consumer. One day this child's going to go out into the world and they should have expectations on how people are going to treat them, how people are going to greet them, what kind of environment they're going to choose to shop from, as well as learning things relating to how to be wise with their money. See, and things that I may not have really mastered when I was growing up, like my parents really never taught me about money. They really didn't, okay? They gave us allowance, right? But they never really told us or showed us what it's like to like work towards something. Okay. And so now that I know that I never had that, I understand that this is information, even things that you didn't think that you didn't know, or things that you might have felt like you made a mistake on in life or whatever, then this is still good information to share with your kid. Why? Because now you know better, and now you can make your kid better. You know what I mean? So that they have a better and easier life than you did. And this is really the root of love. Really, it is. Because, in cases where I've always found it very shocking when, like, I'd see parents who had this sort of competitive nature towards their children. And I always found it very disturbing because I realized, even as a kid, that they struggled with love of their kid. And see, I understood that kids need a nurturing environment, and they cannot be nurtured when their parent is their competitor. Their parent really should be protecting them from all of these sort of negative sort of behaviors. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have households that are just like built on this sort of negative behavior. And what ends up happening, it does affect the child. You know what I mean? So understanding, human behavior and how it affects people's growth, their ability to become things in life. I think that's extremely important, and I'm trying to give people as much information as I can, okay, about parenting, and like I said, I know that I have never been like the major 100% epitome of the best parent. Okay, I think I did a pretty decent job, but I also understand the things that I didn't weren't unaware of, or maybe didn't put enough attention to. I understand, this is something that really does need to have focus and attention. So I would tell other people that this is something that you need to work on. You know what I mean? So it's like, just because you feel as though you made mistakes, those mistakes can definitely be turned into learning experiences. You know what I mean? So that you can help someone else and warn them. You know what I mean? So anyway, let me go into my intuitive messages that I've had, because I had quite a few as I was working on my little project this morning. And I think, I get very depressed when I think about certain things. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh God. Literally, I don't wake up with the same sort of joyfulness that I used to have. Like, I feel as though this has really depleted a lot of my positive energy, okay? And this is why I have to take all this extra time. I've been going out for walks more. You know what I mean? Just going up the street, and I know the library's closed, but because it's a open lawn on the front, I'll go over and sit on the lawn or for a few minutes or whatever. I brought my notebook, not my notebook like my laptop, but I brought my regular paper notebook so I can write down notes or whatever while I'm sitting there. I do things to get out of the house so I can get my sunshine, so I can get some activity going, so I can just change in an environment so that I can get enough energy, enough momentum to keep going. Okay, this really did wipe out a lot in me. Okay, but anyway, I'm glad that people now at least understand that by the time you're 18, and here in the state of California, yes, you are a legal adult and you are responsible for yourself. Okay. Now, throughout the United States, it generally fluctuates. There are some states, I believe, like I want to say up north. Okay. There are some states that might look at the legal age as 21. You know what I mean? But here in the state of California, it's 18. Now, in order to drink alcohol, you have to be 21 years old, okay? But we're considered to be adults, at this time. And like I said, it's some parents, raise their kids, and the minute they turn 18, there's a lot of pressure for them to get out of the house. And that's their choice, okay? But it also says a lot about the family dynamic, right? I understand that a lot of kids are not really prepared financially to get out of the house, okay? So some parents, request that their kids pay rent or whatever, help out, or either cleaning, babysitting their kids, or whatever, whatever. Okay, each family has their whatever, their idea. But if a kid decides to leave their family at the age of 18 and set off on their own, they certainly have every right to do that. They have every right to do that. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't realize that. And it could be because of the fact that they are influenced by their church. And I hate saying things about, trying to make people make decisions about their religion. But the reason why I'm talking about religion and stuff like that is because of this happening to me. And, I literally get disturbed because, I just recently found out, that my dad and is, my biological mom, had Tanya, and, and then had this sort of agreement to have me and all this other stuff. And it's also very weird, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you, I love my father regardless, okay? I love my father very much. But you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. And the thing is that I understand the influence that the church had on people at one time, okay? And, in certain areas, they still have that sort of influence. There was a time where, and I started, looking into when did churches start, associating or connecting the whole cloning thing, which is a practice that happened many, many years ago, and when did they start incorporating it? I'm estimating somewhere between like 200, 300 years ago, okay, where churches started doing this sort of stuff and associating and connecting it. Now, I do believe, just like me, like where I was born in England and then somehow came over here, they may have been doing it here in like, someplace here in the United States, or it could be somewhere. They could have been bringing them in from different places. I have not dug that far into it yet. But I understand that, what the whole idea is getting people to believe that, maybe one of their ancestors, for example, okay, like a Mexican, okay, nothing wrong with being Mexican or anything like that. But, when you think about some of their ancestors were like very indigenous, okay, and they may have, worship sun gods, or they may have, they just had a different custom. And when the Christian influence came in, tried to convert them, they may not have been ready or wanting to convert to that particular religion. So what they'll do in the modern family at one time, okay, like for example, maybe like in the 1930s, they may approach, a Mexican American, and they might say something like, oh, okay, well, your ancestor, she didn't, she was a heathen and she was a sinner because she didn't attend this church, and so they put a lot of burden on this particular family, and they privately somehow get this person cloned and bring them into the household, as if the family has to assume responsibility for the burden, quote unquote burden, of the sin of the previous ancestor. It sounds whacked out and it sounds weird, but you know what? This is another explanation for a lot of these kids that we used to see on these postcards called the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? So this was a regularly practiced thing within certain churches. So obviously most people would think that this is a barbaric thing. It's very barbaric, okay? Because clearly this was something that they were exposed to. This is something they were used to. This is something that they are, and somebody is imposing an idea on them. I'm referring to the ancestor that becomes a clone or whatever. So these people are not sinners, okay? They are not somebody who did anything wrong, okay? But according to the idea or the opinion of man, they choose to clone this person. It's not like, the parents of the couple gets together, they have sex and produce a child who may have some sort of flaw, and then they can say, well, this spiritually happened in the development of this child naturally. These are manufactured, so quote unquote curses that people have inflicted on people for a very long time. Okay, and it's shocking. But when you think about how our government is established to keep the religious freedoms, now we see why. We can see why. Okay, because that's just one of the issues. Okay, like I said, when you bring religion into a form of system of government, it can become dangerous. Okay, you think this whole thing about the DEI thing, and people are really experiencing a lot of mental illness right now. Okay, but if this was like the normal expected form of every transaction that we had, if we were under that sort of system of government, people would be, it would just be terrifying. Okay, so they were right to establish the country the way that they did. And so I think cloning is in this situation is highly unethical. Um, and when I think about my situation, like I just recently found out that I was related to a celebrity. Okay, and it's been very traumatizing for me. In the case of where somebody is abusing um, the idea of cloning, it's like, well, they looked at me as, I believe my birth mother looked at me as a sinner, but she has no problem, trying to gain some sort of, profit off of it or something like that. This is what I'm saying. If something is supposed to be detestable, okay, in the eyes of God, then why make money off of it? Do you see what I'm saying? That's it's hypocritical. You know what I mean? But this is the sort of stuff that goes on. So I'm very glad that this situation came to light, because I have suffered for a very long time, as well as I know that a lot of people who are called targeted individuals have suffered for a very long time. And do I think some of these people are clones, these targeted individuals? I think it's a combination. And a lot of it has to do with the huge number of human trafficked individuals that might belong to church. Do I think a lot of the targeted individuals it has something to do with church related type activities? I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to say yeah. Because, a lot of people feel justified in, trying to control another person. And the reason what makes them feel this way, a lot of it is, the grandiose thinking. A lot of it is things like, religious type delusions. Some of it's apocalyptic. Some of it's just the idea of being superior, demanding that people change their lives in order for them to be in line with their religion. Because when you think about it, their religion a lot of times is all they know. Some people have been raised in religion. You know what I mean? From the time they were, very little to the time that they were adults. And the environment that they had was only religious. Like if you went to an all religious school and then you grew up and opened your own business, you never communicated with anyone outside of your religion. So this is all you know. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to blame anybody, but this is what happens. They don't realize that other people have different ways of seeing things. Okay, so it's difficult for them to interact with other people. Anyway, what this situation has shown, it has demonstrated how mind control works and how ignorant society is. Okay, among other issues that it has proved. And I think a lot of people are going to remember this for a very long time. Yes, people do believe that I can improve work culture. I am doing the best I can, you know what I mean? Talking about this situation and talking about the moral reset, which I am very excited about. Like I said, I want to be thorough on this, and I'm sorry that, it's taking so long, but, at the same time, I am just very exhausted. And also, like I said, I deal with having to recharge, my energy because I feel as though this whole situation is extremely demoralizing. I think when I think about people like leeches, like my mother, my biological mother, who has no legal right over me, I think of somebody who's just extremely abusive, but I also recognize her mentality. Her mentality is one like a slave. The reason why she treats me or treated me the way that she did is because she's used to it, because this is probably the environment that she was raised in. She believes that you're supposed to, because of her religious training, and chances are maybe her family. I don't know. I never really read about Diana Ross's history or anything like that. I've never read about her childhood. I never read about any of that stuff. Okay, I just know that she recorded for Motown, and I do understand overall, that a lot of people of black people, okay, struggled a lot in this country, and a lot of black people were unfortunately in situations where they would rely on other people to get them out of help. Now that's not me bashing him. It's just this is the situation that they were in. So she probably thought it normalized the idea of relying on other people, even if it was against their will. Now I recognize this sort of abuse, and it is illegal, and she had a lot of people work alongside of her in order to accomplish this, along with people like Rex Laverne, and all this whole stuff was just a very dangerous and a toxic situation. Anyway, I do get this message right now that's kind of focusing in my mind. Something about her knowing something about Elon Musk, and I don't know what the whole thing is. Let me see. That a lot of celebrities and politicians are now free, meaning I think a lot of these people may have decided to walk away from their religions. I don't know if everybody in the White House was like Mormon or whatever, but I think they're trying to restructure something. So they're becoming aware of their rights. Okay, so this is what I'm saying, and a lot of this has to do with the education system. The very fact that a lot of people do not know these things, or just becoming aware of it. A lot of it does have to do with the educational system. So, like I'm talking about in my next project, which is called Pathways to Excellence. This issue has given me more things to consider, because when you think about religious schools, what is it that they're teaching them, their students, about our United States government? And we definitely have to be on the same page. We have to be on the same page when it comes to public, private, and homeschool kids. When it comes to understanding how the system of government works, I would think, you could talk about, like, if a particular member of the government belonged to their particular religion, yeah, I can understand you maybe studying this particular person. But if people walk away with the idea of, I own this place because I'm of this religion, or whatever religions are teaching their students in their public schools, they should at least be in agreement with some sort of main understanding of how the system of government works. what the country was established on, okay? And then highlight maybe any member of their group that may have made any sort of contributions. And I'm not, the reason why I'm saying this is because, like I said, if somebody has this in their head that they, that they're superior, or like, we're not only contributors of this government, we own this place, we can have another repeat of this, okay? A lot of people understand it is well known and accepted that Maria Gordon does not believe in marriage. Well, I think my biological mother, who has no legal right over me, I'm constantly going to say that, okay? Because I feel like I have to constantly reiterate it, because after years and years and years and years of dealing with this circular issue, me not even realizing that she was playing that much of a role, or even knowing that she was involved at all, okay, has become quite a shock to me. And I need to make it clear, because a lot of people were dealing with a lot of delusions, being hyped up by the group mentality, and were playing games and constantly ignoring what I was trying to tell them, okay? No, she is not any sort of connection with me, but I do believe that because she had the mentality of, I need to lean on somebody, I need to help, I'm going to use family members, even though I don't consider her my family. She's never changed my diaper, or she was my mother. I don't have anything connection to her. I don't even know her, right? But she was under the impression that I was going to help her in some way, or without my consent, or I was somehow going to, be her cash cow. You know what I mean? She was going to abuse me financially. Okay. And I do believe that maybe this is one of the reasons why she wanted me to get married, because she was probably hoping that I would get married into a relationship where maybe somebody could be, very wealthy, so that somehow, a lot of families or marriages believe that the families are merging through a financial transaction, a financial deal. Okay, and you know what? No one's going to slave me out. Okay, no one's going to slave me out. I have reasons why, I've chosen not to get married. Like I said, I realized I was a target for a very long time. Okay, and it had nothing to do with defiance. It has nothing to do with the fact that, I can't, it has nothing to do with that. It's just that, those kind of marriages scare the hell out of me. Okay, because that right there, I believe that she wanted me to be set up in an abusive relationship so that she could benefit. Yes, this is how sick it really gets. Okay, but I didn't know all that at the time. I just knew that I was always encountering people that were, rude or suspicious or whatever. Also, I have been taking care of myself for a very long time. And you become accustomed to this sort of stuff. It is what it is, okay? And I feel as though this issue of my marital status should have never been brought up in a work issue. And I understand people, the thing about the work environment, I realize how unnatural the work environment is. And yes, it is unnatural, okay? I understand things like, people do rude things all the time, okay? And it's almost like it's instinct for them to do this. And, this is why, professionalism has to come into play. You have to constantly be aware of where you are, what you say, and what you do. This is what a part of professionalism, using social etiquette, using proper manners, setting your boundaries and giving people the ability to set their boundaries, and being respectful for the 8 hours or however long you're going to be there for. But I do understand, how human behavior is, and that's one of the reasons why, I do think the workplace is an unnatural place, and this is one of the reasons why I emphasize the need to be professional. And I'm a woman who has to take care of herself, okay? Meaning I don't expect anybody to take care of me. I am not going to get into a relationship to use anybody for their financial resources, okay? And that's just the way it is, okay? I see a lot of potential abusive situations in those scenarios. So I choose to take care of myself. Now, I understand, like, when someone like me who comes into a place of business, and I usually do dress very nice for my interviews, as any professional magazine would tell you to dress professional, okay? No doubt, right? But you know, I do take pride in my appearance, meaning I try to be, I dress for being up to uplift myself. I dress to be positive. I dress to be professional. I dress to make a statement, meaning, hey, you know, I'm here for this job interview. I am dressed professionally because this is my package. This is my way of making my money. I'm going to do so in a professional way. And a lot of it does have to do with work culture. I think some of the places that were picked for me to work at really didn't fit the kind of place it was a bad match for me. Like, you know, trucking industry and stuff like that. You know, if somebody who is happy, content with being my image of professional, then that's the kind of place that I need to be in. No duh, right? But you have these, you know, networks that are always putting you in places that don't make any sense. Anyway, but going back to this, you know, I'm somebody who I would say that most people think that I look nice, meaning I don't think of myself as beautiful. I do not think of myself as gorgeous, but somebody who takes care of themselves. Okay, and so sometimes people think, oh well, she's doing this, and they put a smile on their face. Some people think that it's a compliment when they say certain things, but not really, not in the context of work. Okay, I am just being professional. I am just being myself, and it has nothing to do with my desire to be married. Okay, and so what a lot of people forget when it comes to being professional and being in the work environment is that people just have to expect me to be professional, and they need to be professional too. It is what it is. Okay, and you know, when it comes to you know, tying my work in with with marriage and stuff like that, she caused me a lot of pain. You know what I mean? I've never wanted to ever have to go into my marital status with any, and I'm not ashamed to be single. I am not ashamed to be single. I mean, given the circumstances of my life, it's like it makes sense for me to be single. I'm proud to make that decision. Okay, but at the same time, it's like, you know, I seriously go to work to be the best I possibly can for my own satisfaction, to make a living. You know what I mean? I try to make the best of every situation. And, you know, when people get into and are unprofessional and start holding it against me or want to grill me with questions, it's very demeaning and demoralizing. Also, you know, I think of the sort of harassment that goes on, and what the message that it sends to people. It sends a message of your life is garbage. Your life is garbage because anytime people try to make some sort of life improvement, you know, then you have to risk losing your job. Like, for example, you know, a woman might be 200 something pounds, right? She might be 200 something pounds. And then now she loses weight, and now she's like down to 135 pounds. Now she's finally feeling good about herself. And then she has these people who are like, well, you know, if you continue to be this way, we're gonna shut you out. We're gonna blacklist you. We're gonna do all this sort of stuff. So you have a right. You have a choice to make. Obviously, you know, any doctor will tell you if or psychologist or any sort of professional will tell you that these are the sort of things you're supposed to aim for. Okay, and then you have people who are trying to tell you that if you improve your life, then you're basically going to have to die out in the street. That's basically what the message is. And so you get people who want to harass you at work and all this other stuff. And this is, you know, identifying exactly who is, you know, professional, who isn't. And then also really talking about, it does highlight, you know, what companies really are interested in work-life balance. Because it almost seems as though, you know, you have to be a miserable fat slob in order to exist, and you're only existing, and there is no other meaning or purpose in your life other than to live for the company, base your life off of what your boss tells you to do, and you look in the mirror and you hate yourself, and this is the only life that you're supposed to have. That's bullshit. You know that this is bullying, and it's wrong, and it caused me a lot of trauma that my mother, biological mother, who should have never had anything to do with my life at all, okay, as far as I'm concerned, has held my life back for her own selfish pleasure, I guess. And, you know, I highly resent that. And I'm disturbed by it. I do have the intuitive message. There's a lot of women here, and I've not just the intuitive message. I've seen it. A lot of the women here in Bakersfield have really improved themselves. I've even seen it in the stores. I've seen women going to school stores. This is the nicest I've seen people look. And I've, you know, And I think that's wonderful. I think it's great that people are starting to take care of themselves, give themselves self-love, going to places and coordinating outfits and trying to love themselves more. Because really, when you think about the abusive nature of our society, you're guaranteed that you're not going to, you should not expect any love to come to you through external sources. If you need love, you best believe you're gonna have to rely on yourself to get it. At least first, anyway. Anyway, so I do get the intuitive message that a lot of people understand that I'm going through trauma, and yeah, I am still, and like I said, what bothers me the most is that they wiped me out on the emotional level, meaning like it's hard for me to get excited or feel like really any sort of like happiness, excitement, any sort of anything, right? Because they basically took and destroyed my life, threw it up in the air, and they had no right to. You know what I mean? People were impressed with maybe working alongside of a celebrity like Diana Ross and thinking that they were doing help, and then they got big headed, and then it got out of control. And then we have this woman, Diana Ross, who's probably I think she's younger than my dad, but whatever, by a few years anyway. Uh, who comes from the old school, who comes from this religion, who I think is funny, because when I think of her on stage persona, here's another woman who wears makeup on stage, but she doesn't want anybody wearing it on their own free time. Why is that? Is that a form of mind control? Is it only okay for stars to be, decked out and looking nice and presentable on stage when they're making money for their handlers? Or is it highly resented when you are taking care of yourself and feeling good about yourself, and this is something that is resented by the handler? I don't know, whatever the case is, but she is just somebody who is a breeder to me, nothing more than a breeder to me. And she had no legal right to hold my life back and make my life a living hell. And I seriously do resent that. Anyway, I also get the intuitive message that yes, a lot of people are talking about heaven now. I had talked about the abuse of man-made religion and doing these sort of things like modifying people, turning people into homosexuals, or knowing people have these sort of tendencies, and then persecuting them for something that was, I'm going to say, possibly manipulated by them. It's very sick. And I do think that, and like I said, I have nothing against people who truly believe in God, people who want to even practice rituals or prayer circles in their religion. I have nothing against that. But religion is a lot of times religion is a breeding ground for mental illness. Okay, it really is. You get people who have this feeling of superiority, enacting it out on other people with, the idea of cloning burden babies, and then them coming back and like, attacking them years later. Or the birth breeder comes back and feels, oh, this person, I see they're successful, or they feel like you have the potential to get successful, and now all of a sudden they want to have their hand out. You know what I mean? It's just like, no. And I think a lot of this has to do with a good percentage of it is what we're looking at when it comes to human trafficking. We have a lot of this religious and burden babies, with people coming back trying to get something from these burden babies, clones, whatever. I think a lot of them are clones. A lot of it is workplace retaliation. Some of it is, people, just regular domestic violence, abuse, or whatever the case is. In every sector of society, it has to be, the word needs to be spread that this needs to stop, and identify these dual associations, affiliations, and get them the hell out of here, so that we can have a decent earth as we move forward. Okay, and there are people, like I said, there are people who have put a lot of effort into bringing new offspring into the world. What is the point of bringing new offspring if the world is garbage? So let's clean it up and make it a better place. Also, yeah, I do believe that I have the correct path of life, at least for me. Okay, I am completely content living my lifestyle. I do resent people who try to impose on that. And see, a lot of people have been used to the idea of imposing on others because it's either a part of the religion. And I will tell you, if you compose your stuff in this sort of manner again, then you're basically enacting a form of terrorism, which is completely unappreciated. The whole thing is like, I'm talking about setting boundaries and, talking about respecting other people's personal space. respecting people's property, talking about things like stealing and stuff like that. It is a form of stealing. I feel as though somebody stole years from me, okay, through human trafficking. Okay, meaning they prevented me from having opportunities that I was rightfully supposed to have. Whether that be, me being able to sit at work in doing my job in peace of mind, or me being able to go downtown and have like maybe some sort of lessons that I wanted to take. Like I wanted to finish my guitar lessons, right? Like, I remember, things got kind of weird. That was when I signed up a few years ago. It was almost 20 years ago, actually. But still, it's like, oh, I was never able to just go somewhere and enjoy the experience without somebody bothering me, okay? Because I was being trafficked, because I was being targeted, because I was, whatever, okay? Whatever that might be, okay? It might be me meeting a girl down the street, right? And me wanting to be friends with her, and unfortunately, they make this person a toxic person. They create toxicity. They turn people against you, or they make that person somehow be a dual agent, and I get tired of that. Okay, so Diana Ross, I don't care what happens to her. Okay, the sooner she gets off the earth, the better. And people like her. Okay, so human trafficking is a huge, huge problem. And I hope that people have learned from this. I'm certainly going to be talking about it. And, I hope to be as thorough as I possibly can in the moral reset. I am talking about these agencies. I talked about my uncomfortable feeling with a lot of agencies, wondering, are they really able to provide this sort of help? Do they have dual affiliations? Or even worse, are these companies or agencies actually covers for these sort of people? Like maybe cloning facilities. How do I know? This is what I'm saying. Okay, so if people have the ability to like kind of decide the fate for certain people, for example, my mom, Mary Gordon, okay, she knew that I was, but did she realize that my birth mother was going to come back years from now and abuse me? If you are in custody of a child, you need to understand that once that child becomes 18 years old or whatever, becomes an adult and leaves at whatever age, okay? Because sometimes people can stay with their parents longer than 18 or whatever. But whatever world that they have to face, they always have the possibility of falling into this sort of danger. And maybe you're just using them to get a paycheck because, you're getting money for foster care, or maybe you got a nice job or whatever because, this burden baby or whatever. But this kid has a world that they have to live in after all of this, okay? So you could either throw them to the dogs or help build them up and at least try to provide some sort of protection by not participating in human trafficking and allowing this to happen to them. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video, and I will be back with another video sometime later.